I'm Margaret Collins, 38 years old, and I never imagined that my own sister would betray me so completely at our parents' dining table. It was their 40th wedding anniversary, an evening designed for celebration and joy, held at their comfortable home nestled in Austin, Texas. I had dedicated countless hours to crafting a perfect rose petal cake, drawing from a cherished recipe from my former flower shop days to pay tribute to Mom and Dad. The dining room was alive with animated conversation, neighbors, relatives, friends, accompanied by the gentle clinking of wine glasses creating a symphony of celebration. I was carefully arranging the cake on the table, filled with pride at the delicate pink swirls that decorated its surface, when everything suddenly crumbled around me. My sister, 5 years my junior, reclined in her chair with deliberate casualness, her voice slicing through the joyful laughter like a razor-sharp blade. "Margaret, you're preventing us from moving forward," she declared, her eyes ice-cold and distant, not even bothering to acknowledge the beautiful cake I had created. "We want to exist without your presence here." Those words struck me like a devastating blow to the chest. Dad, positioned at the head of the table in his usual spot, simply continued, smiling pleasantly while sipping his deep red wine, as though she had merely made an observation about the pleasant weather outside. Mom became completely motionless, her fork suspended in midair above her plate, frozen in shock. The neighbors, Diane from the house next door, Robert and Ellen from their home across the street, fell into an uncomfortable silence, their eyes shifting nervously between the two of us like spectators at a tennis match. I felt intense heat rise in my face and spread across my cheeks, but I refused to utter a single word in response. Instead, I forced myself to maintain a composed smile, carefully picked up my wine glass with steady hands, and took a deliberate, slow sip, allowing the bitter taste to perfectly match the sharp sting that had settled deep within my chest. Not a soul spoke up in my defense. Not Dad, not Mom, not even one solitary guest among all those present. The atmosphere in the room became dense and oppressive, making it difficult to breathe normally. I gently set my glass back down on the table, rose from my chair with dignity intact, and walked purposefully toward my childhood bedroom. Every movement was calm and calculated, each step carefully measured and controlled. They were completely unworthy of witnessing my tears or emotional breakdown. I methodically packed a single suitcase with essential items, clothing, a handful of precious photographs, and my reliable laptop computer. The entire house had fallen into an eerie quiet as I carefully slipped out through the back door into the crisp, cool Texas evening air. My phone remained completely silent as I drove my car to a modest motel located 10 miles away from the family home. I didn't allow myself to look back even once during the journey. All I understood with absolute certainty was this fundamental truth. From that pivotal moment forward, I would never again return to being perceived as someone's burden or inconvenience. Not to anyone in this world. Not even to my own flesh and blood family members. But what about their future circumstances? When the electrical lights eventually go out, the running water comes to a complete stop, and the monthly bills begin accumulating in threatening piles, will they still find it quite so effortless and convenient to live their lives without my presence and support? What time is it in your current location? And from which city are you observing and following this unfolding story? Please drop a comment in the section below. I genuinely want to see how far and wide this personal story is reaching across different places, and discover who out there silently understands and relates to this painful experience. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because in the upcoming next installment, I begin the process of cutting off every single financial bill and payment. Let's have an honest discussion about boundaries, real, meaningful ones that actually matter. I awakened in the modest motel room, with only the steady hum of the air conditioning unit providing any sound to break the profound silence surrounding me. My phone lay face down on the nightstand beside the bed, still buzzing persistently with numerous unread messages from both my sister and Mom. I deliberately didn't touch it or acknowledge its presence. Instead, I found myself staring upward at the plain ceiling above, my mind wandering and drifting back to contemplate how exactly I had ended up in this particular situation. Not merely in this inexpensive room with its rough, scratchy sheets, but in an entire life where my own family members viewed me as nothing more than a heavy weight to be discarded and shed. 5 years ago, I was the proud owner of Petals and Stems, a small but charming flower shop located in downtown Austin. It wasn't particularly glamorous or impressive, but it belonged entirely to me. Nervous, glowing brides would enter my shop requesting peonies or roses to help make their special day absolutely perfect. I would stay awake late into the night, carefully arranging beautiful bouquets, my hands frequently pricked by sharp thorns. But I cherished and loved every single second of that work. The shop represented my greatest pride and accomplishment, built completely from scratch after years of diligent saving and careful planning. Then one evening, Dad called me, his voice heavy with worry and concern. Their house, the very same one where I had grown up and spent my childhood, was drowning helplessly in overwhelming debt. Medical bills for Mom's necessary surgery, along with a second mortgage, had created an impossible financial situation. They simply couldn't keep up with essential repairs, including a persistently leaking roof. They were dangerously close to losing absolutely everything they had worked for. I didn't hesitate for even a moment. I sold Petals and Stems for $150,000, exactly enough money to completely clear their debts, fix the troublesome roof properly, and keep the lights functioning normally. I moved back into my childhood bedroom, convinced it would be temporary, just until they could get back on their feet financially. But what I thought would be temporary stretched into 5 long years. I faithfully paid all the bills, electricity, water, internet service, even the property taxes. Nearly $2,000 every month wired directly from my personal bank account. I accepted a position at a local nursery arranging plants for half the income one had earned at my own shop, just to maintain steady cash flow for the household. Dad would nod his appreciation and thanks. Mom would embrace me warmly, but my sister, she consistently acted as though I were an unwelcome intruder in their home. Rebecca, or Becca as I used to affectionately call her during our childhood days, had changed dramatically after I moved back in. Dad and Mom remained completely oblivious to the mounting tension that filled every corner of our household. Dad would spend his entire days tinkering and working in the cluttered garage, fixing neighbors' broken lawnmowers for small amounts of extra cash to supplement their meager income. Mom was perpetually glued to her beloved gardening club activities, constantly chatting and gossiping with Diane from the house next door about various rose bushes, soil conditions, and seasonal planting techniques. They consistently leaned on me for financial support and monetary assistance, but never once bothered to ask how I was emotionally holding up under the enormous pressure or managing the overwhelming stress of carrying their entire household. I didn't blame them for their lack of awareness. They were both retired now, their life savings completely drained and depleted from years of medical expenses and unexpected costs. But Rebecca's deliberate coldness and calculated indifference cut far deeper into my soul than their obliviousness ever could. She would intentionally blast loud music at maximum volume to completely drown out my voice whenever I attempted to engage in conversation or communicate with her. She would leave passive-aggressive notes strategically placed around the house regarding various chores and household responsibilities, each one more pointed and hurtful than the last. Just last month, she deliberately told Mom in a voice loud enough for me to clearly overhear that I was essentially mooching and taking advantage of them, as if I wasn't the sole person keeping the entire house operational and financially afloat. The irony was absolutely staggering and painful. Lying there in that uncomfortable motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles above me, I finally realized with crystal clarity how completely blind and naive I had been to the true situation. I had voluntarily given up my thriving business, my hard-earned independence, and my personal freedom to keep their comfortable lives completely intact and undisturbed. And for what ultimate purpose? So that my sister could publicly call me unappreciated and unwanted, so that Dad could simply smile pleasantly like my pain meant absolutely nothing, and so that Mom could remain completely silent when I needed her support most desperately. The cherished childhood memory of Becca as a young girl, giggling sweetly under the brilliant stars while we shared our deepest dreams and secrets, now felt like nothing more than an elaborate lie I had told myself. She wasn't that innocent, loving girl anymore. Perhaps she had never truly been that person at all, and I had simply been too hopeful and optimistic to see the reality of who she was becoming. My personal savings were now nearly completely gone, depleted from years of supporting others. My job at the local nursery barely covered my own basic living expenses, and yet I was still continuously pouring substantial amounts of money into maintaining a house and supporting a family that clearly didn't want or appreciate my presence. I sat up abruptly in the bed, my chest feeling tight with realization, and grabbed my laptop computer with determined purpose. I desperately needed to know exactly how much financial burden I was carrying for them on a monthly basis. That's precisely when the revolutionary idea started forming and taking shape in my mind. This wasn't about revenge or getting even, not yet anyway. I checked out of the dreary motel by noon the following day, my single suitcase rattling and bouncing noisily in the trunk as I drove across the familiar streets of Austin to reach Thomas and Laura's comfortable house. They had been my absolute lifeline and emotional support system ever since I sold petals and stems. Always consistently there with a steaming hot cup of coffee, genuine encouragement, or a perfectly timed laugh when I needed it most. Their charming small bungalow located in the Hyde Park neighborhood was like entering a completely different world, far removed from the motel's harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights and depressing atmosphere. It felt like a sanctuary where I could finally breathe normally, think clearly, and carefully figure out what should come next in my life. As I slowly pulled into their welcoming driveway, my phone continued to buzz persistently with numerous texts that I still absolutely refused to open or acknowledge. Thomas opened the front door before I could even raise my hand to knock. His kind face was creased with genuine worry and concern. "Margaret, what on earth happened?" he asked urgently, immediately pulling me inside their warm home. Laura was already positioned in the cozy kitchen, thoughtfully setting out an attractive plate of freshly made sandwiches, her eyes soft with compassion but clearly searching for answers. I sank heavily into a comfortable chair at their dining table, feeling the enormous weight of the last 24 hours pressing relentlessly into my chest like a physical burden. I told them absolutely everything that had transpired, not just about the beautiful cake or the expensive wine, but about the sharp, devastating sting of my sister's cruel words. How she had callously called me unappreciated and unwanted in front of everyone present. How Dad had simply continued sipping his wine without even blinking or acknowledging what was happening. How Mom had said absolutely nothing in my defense, remaining completely silent when I desperately needed her support. She declared that they would all be better off without me, I told Thomas, my voice remaining steady and controlled, though my throat burned with suppressed emotion. And not a single person in that room stopped her or spoke up for me. Laura reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand with genuine warmth and understanding. Thomas leaned back thoughtfully in his chair, his jaw visibly tight, as if he was connecting the dots to something long familiar and deeply troubling that he had witnessed before. "You know," he said carefully after a long moment of contemplation, "this entire situation reminds me strongly of Edward Hayes." Edward Hayes had been an old friend from our early business days, a dedicated guy who used to successfully run a landscaping company back when I was first opening and establishing my flower shop. Thomas told Edward's story like the events had just happened yesterday, with vivid detail and emotional resonance. Edward's grown daughter had lived completely rent-free in a beautiful house that he faithfully paid for every month. She had repeatedly called him overbearing and controlling, claiming he was constantly in her way and interfering with her life, even though he was the sole person paying her car note, all her utilities, and even expensive daycare costs for her young son. One particularly difficult day, she told him directly not to come around her home anymore. She said he was dragging her down and preventing her from living her life freely. Edward didn't argue, debate, or try to change her mind. He immediately canceled absolutely everything: electricity, water, the car lease, every single financial support he had been providing. Within just 1 month, she was desperately begging him to come back, making promises to change her behavior and attitude. "He never went back," Thomas said, his voice low and resolute with conviction. He bought a beautiful condo in San Antonio and started his life over completely fresh. She had to learn to stand on her own 2 feet and support herself. Sometimes people need to feel the full weight of responsibility before they ever truly value what you've been carrying for them. Laura nodded in agreement, carefully pouring me a fresh cup of aromatic coffee. "You've been carrying your entire family for years, Margaret," she said with quiet intensity. "What do they even do without your constant financial support?" That simple but profound question hit harder than I had expected it to. I had never seriously thought about the situation from that particular perspective before. Not really, not honestly. I had always viewed those monthly payments as helping and supporting my family, not enabling their dependence or creating an unhealthy dynamic. But sitting there comfortably with Thomas and Laura, looking at me like someone who genuinely deserved much better treatment, the truth became absolutely obvious and undeniable. My sister, my dad, my mom, they had systematically built their entire comfortable lifestyle around my personal sacrifices and financial contributions, and they didn't even see me as a real person in the equation. I opened my laptop with newfound determination. My fingers moved quickly and decisively before I could second-guess myself or lose my nerve. I logged into my bank account, watching as the screen lit up with seemingly endless rows of automatic payments. Electricity, $300 every month. Water, $100. Internet, $80. Home insurance for $100. Small repairs, multiple streaming subscriptions, random miscellaneous fees. Nearly $2,000 each month steadily drained from the savings I had carefully built through years of diligently arranging beautiful roses and delicate lilies for appreciative customers. Thomas gave a small, knowing nod, like he understood exactly what was coming next. Laura remained quiet and supportive, her facial expression calm but firm with resolve. I opened the payment settings with steady hands. My heart was racing with anticipation, but my hands remained completely steady and controlled. Electricity, canceled. Water, canceled. Internet, gone. Insurance, terminated. One by one, I methodically cut every single thread tying me financially to that house and family. Each decisive click felt like shedding a massive load I didn't even realize I was still carrying on my shoulders. I wasn't feeling angry anymore, at least not in that moment. I felt remarkably clear and focused, clearer than I had been in many years. They had explicitly stated they wanted to live without me. So be it, I would grant them exactly what they had requested. I closed the laptop with finality. Thomas clapped a supportive hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said with conviction. Laura generously offered me their comfortable guest room, saying I could stay as long as I needed to figure things out. I thanked them both sincerely, my voice coming out quieter than usual, but my decision was absolutely solid and unshakable. My phone buzzed again, insistently. Another message, probably from my sister or mom, trying to reach me. I didn't check it or acknowledge it. Not yet, anyway. I wasn't ready to hear their excuses or attempts at manipulation. I needed to hold onto this precious clarity and sense of purpose before the inevitable chaos returned, because I knew with certainty it would come. They were about to feel the real consequences of their actions and words. And this time, I would be completely ready and prepared. 3 days after I canceled all the automatic payments, the first cracks started to show in their comfortable facade. I was sitting peacefully at Thomas and Laura's place, slowly sipping coffee at their kitchen table, when my phone rang loudly. Rebecca's name flashed across the screen like an urgent warning light, demanding my immediate attention. I let the phone ring a couple of times deliberately before finally answering, steeling myself for what was inevitably coming. "Margaret, what exactly did you do?" Her voice was sharp and cutting, with a distinct edge of panic that I had never heard from her before. "The internet is completely out and disconnected. I can't submit any of my freelance jobs or meet my deadlines. And Mom's absolutely freaking out because we just received shut-off notices for both electricity and water services. Turn everything back on immediately right now." No polite greeting, no sincere apology for her cruel words at the anniversary dinner, just direct orders and commands, as if I was still the unpaid manager and caretaker of their entire lives. I leaned back comfortably in my chair at Thomas and Laura's kitchen table, deliberately steadying my tone and controlling my emotions. "You explicitly said you wanted to live without me," I responded calmly. "Well, this is exactly what that looks like in reality." Rebecca didn't miss a beat or pause for even a moment. "You're completely overreacting, Margaret. This is ridiculous. Just flip everything back on immediately and stop being so dramatic about this whole situation." I wasn't surprised by her response at all. She had always possessed a remarkable gift for twisting every situation around and making me feel like I was the fundamental problem, no matter what the circumstances were. I could clearly hear Mom in the background, her voice shaky and trembling, probably rambling anxiously about the refrigerator losing power and all the food spoiling. "It's not my job or responsibility to keep your life running smoothly," I told her with firm conviction. "You're 30 years old, Rebecca. Figure it out for yourself." There was a long, uncomfortable pause on the other end of the line. Then she laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and mocking. "You're so overly sensitive about everything. Nobody wants you around here anyway. This is exactly why we feel this way about you." Then she abruptly hung up on me without another word. I set the phone down carefully on the table. My hands didn't shake or tremble, though my chest burned with a mixture of hurt and determination. Laura glanced over curiously from the kitchen counter, raising an inquisitive eyebrow. "She's got some serious nerve," she commented with obvious disapproval. Thomas folded his newspaper neatly and gave a low, knowing chuckle. "Give it a few more days," he said confidently. "They'll definitely feel the full impact then." I nodded in agreement, but something deep inside me twisted uncomfortably. Mom's voice, nervous and unsettled, continued to linger in my mind. She hadn't stood up for me that devastating night at the anniversary dinner, hadn't said a single word in my defense, but she was still my mother after all these years. Was I deliberately punishing her too harshly along with the others? I firmly shook the troubling thought off. They had all let Rebecca speak for the entire family that night. That had been their collective choice, and they would have to live with the consequences. Later that same afternoon, Mom called my phone directly. Her voice was remarkably soft and pleading, completely different from Rebecca's harsh demands. "Margaret, sweetheart, please listen to me. The house is literally falling apart around us. Rebecca can't work properly without internet access. Your dad can't receive lawnmower repair requests without Wi-Fi connectivity. Can't you just turn everything back on for us? We're family after all." I closed my eyes tightly and pictured her sitting in the familiar living room surrounded by her beloved gardening books, probably wringing her hands nervously like she always did whenever she felt anxious or overwhelmed. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady but not cold or cruel, "Rebecca clearly said you'd all be better off without me in your lives. You didn't disagree with her statement or contradict her, so I'm simply giving her exactly what she specifically requested." There was a long, heavy silence on the phone line. Then she whispered barely audibly, "She didn't really mean those things. You know how she gets when she's upset. Please just come home to us." I didn't respond immediately. I thought carefully about all the months I had spent tiptoeing cautiously through that house, faithfully paying all their bills, quietly absorbing Rebecca's constant insults and cruel comments, hoping desperately for just a small shred of genuine thanks or appreciation. "I'm not coming back," I said with finality. "Not until Rebecca takes full responsibility for what she said and genuinely apologizes." Mom tried to cut in and interrupt me, but I stopped her firmly. "You let her say those horrible things, Mom. You and Dad just sat there in complete silence. You're all equally responsible for what happened." Then I hung up the phone, decisively. My heart raced rapidly, but I felt remarkably clear and focused about my decision. Laura had overheard the entire conversation from the kitchen. She gave me a small, supportive nod of approval. "You're much stronger than I would have been in this situation," she said with genuine admiration. I didn't feel particularly strong at all. I just felt utterly tired, but strangely focused on what needed to be done. That same evening, Rebecca called again, noticeably angrier this time than during our earlier conversation. "You think this is some kind of game, Margaret? The neighbors are starting to notice all the problems. Diane came over acting all concerned and worried, but I know she's just being nosy and gathering gossip. You're embarrassing all of us in the neighborhood." I nearly laughed out loud at the sheer absurdity. Embarrassing them after everything they had put me through. That's what truly mattered to them now, their public reputation. "You embarrassed yourself," I said firmly. "You specifically wanted me gone from your lives. Now I'm gone completely. Handle your own bills and responsibilities." She absolutely exploded with rage, calling me selfish and self-centered, saying I had always been jealous of her success and popularity. I didn't bother listening to her angry rant. I ended the call immediately and blocked her number permanently from my phone. Thomas walked into the kitchen just as I set the phone down on the table. He gave me an enthusiastic, thumbs-up gesture. "About time you did that," he said with obvious approval. The next morning, Mom left yet another voicemail message. Her voice was noticeably quieter this time, almost desperate and pleading. "Margaret, we simply can't keep up without your financial help. The water bill's due tomorrow. Rebecca is trying to borrow money from Diane and the other neighbors. Please just talk to us and work this out." I didn't call back or acknowledge the message. I wasn't ready for more weak excuses, more desperate pleas that completely avoided addressing the fundamental truth of what had happened. Rebecca had drawn a clear line in the sand that terrible night, and Mom and Dad had simply let her do it without any objection. Now they were all scrambling frantically to fix their situation, and I wasn't going to swoop in heroically and save them from the consequences of their choices. Not this time around. I continued staying comfortably with Thomas and Laura in their welcoming home. I helped Laura prepare dinner each evening, chatted pleasantly with Thomas about his exciting new organic shop venture. Their home felt like a genuine shelter and sanctuary, a place where I wasn't invisible or taken for granted. But I knew with certainty that the storm wasn't over yet. Rebecca wouldn't let this situation go easily, and Mom's increasingly desperate calls would definitely keep coming. I braced myself mentally for whatever was coming next, knowing deep down in my heart that I'd made the absolutely right choice, no matter how emotionally heavy it felt. 2 weeks after the power went out at the family house, the serious cracks in my family's comfortable world started to show prominently. I was still staying peacefully at Thomas and Laura's house, gradually settling into their cozy guest room, when I received an unexpected text message from Diane, the longtime neighbor who lived next door to my parents' house. "Everything okay with your folks?" The message read simply. "Heard some concerning stuff around the neighborhood." I didn't reply to her message, but I knew exactly what she meant by her carefully worded inquiry. Austin's a large city with many neighborhoods, but residential areas like ours tend to talk and share information, and the Collins family was rapidly becoming prime gossip fodder for local conversations. I had permanently blocked my sister's phone number, but Mom's increasingly frantic voicemails kept coming regularly, each one noticeably more desperate and panicked than the last. I reluctantly listened to the most recent one, her voice thin and severely strained with worry. "Margaret, we received an official notice from the bank," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're falling behind on the house payments without your help. Please call me back as soon as possible." I deleted the message immediately, but the content lingered troublingly in my mind. The bank notice wasn't a surprise at all. Without my regular monthly transfers, the mortgage payments, utility bills, and property taxes were steadily piling up into an insurmountable mountain of debt. My sister had always relied completely on my financial contributions to keep the house afloat and operational. Her part-time boutique job barely covered her own personal expenses, let alone contributed to household costs. Now, with absolutely no internet access to pursue her various freelance gigs and design projects, she was rapidly sinking into financial desperation. Thomas caught me staring pensively at my phone screen and raised a questioning eyebrow in my direction. "You're not going soft on them, are you?" he asked with a half-joking tone, though I could detect genuine concern in his voice. I shook my head firmly and decisively. "They need to learn to handle their own problems," I said with conviction. But even as I spoke, my voice wasn't quite as firm and resolute as I wanted it to be, and I could hear the slight uncertainty creeping in. Laura, who was methodically chopping fresh vegetables for our evening dinner, glanced over from the kitchen counter with a knowing look. "They'll figure out a solution eventually," she said matter-of-factly, "or they won't manage to solve their problems. Either way, it's definitely not your mess to clean up anymore." The next day, I made the decision to drive by the old neighborhood, not to visit or check on them, but simply to pick up an important package I had redirected to a nearby post office for convenience. As I slowly turned onto our familiar street, I immediately noticed Robert and Ellen Parker, the longtime couple who lived directly across from my parents' house, standing prominently on their well-maintained lawn, whispering conspiratorially to each other. They abruptly stopped their hushed conversation when they spotted my car approaching, with Ellen offering an awkward, uncomfortable wave in my direction. I deliberately didn't wave back, keeping my eyes focused straight ahead on the road. Diane was outside as well, busily watering her prized rose bushes, her curious eyes repeatedly flicking toward my parents' house with obvious interest. The front lawn was noticeably overgrown and unkempt, and the mailbox appeared to be stuffed completely full with envelopes spilling out onto the ground, no doubt containing various bills and notices. I kept driving steadily without slowing down, but the troubling image remained stuck firmly in my mind, my family's once comfortable life visibly unraveling and becoming a spectacle for everyone in the neighborhood to witness and discuss. Later that same week, I learned disturbing news from Laura, who had heard the information through a mutual friend's gossip network, that my sister had unfortunately lost a significant freelance contract that she had been counting on. Without reliable internet access, she simply couldn't deliver the crucial design work for a prominent clothing brand she'd been pitching to and courting for many months. The client grew impatient and moved on to another designer, leaving Rebecca scrambling desperately to find alternative income sources. She had been forced to take a demanding night shift position at a local supermarket, stocking heavy shelves and organizing inventory to make even the most basic ends meet. I couldn't help but picture her laboring under harsh fluorescent lights, mechanically pushing a squeaky cart filled with canned goods and packaged items, her once proud designer aspirations and ego thoroughly bruised and deflated. Part of me genuinely felt a sharp pang of sympathy and concern. She was still my sister, after all, despite everything that had transpired between us. But then I forced myself to remember her cruel words at that devastating anniversary dinner, delivered so sharp and unapologetically, without any regard for my feelings or contributions to the family. She had deliberately chosen this destructive path forward, not me. I had simply responded to her explicit wishes. Mom showed up unexpectedly at Thomas and Laura's house one evening, completely unannounced, her face drawn and haggard, her usual cheerful gardening, club demeanor completely gone and replaced by obvious distress. I was comfortably settled in the living room, helping Laura sort through old photo albums and reminisce about better times, when the doorbell rang insistently. Thomas graciously let her into the house, and Mom stood uncertainly in the doorway, clutching her worn purse tightly like a protective shield against potential confrontation. "Margaret, we desperately need to talk," she said, her voice deliberately low, but unmistakably urgent and pleading. I remained seated in my comfortable position, gesturing calmly toward the empty couch across from me. "Sit down, Mom," I said evenly, keeping my tone carefully neutral and non-confrontational. She hesitated noticeably for several moments, then finally perched nervously on the very edge of the couch cushion, her anxious eyes darting around the room like she was afraid to settle and get comfortable. "The bank is seriously threatening to foreclose on the house," she said, her worried words tumbling out rapidly and breathlessly. "Rebecca is working exhausting nights at the supermarket, but it's simply not nearly enough money. Your dad's desperately trying to pick up more lawnmower repair jobs, but without Wi-Fi access, he can't receive orders or communicate with potential customers. We're completely falling apart, Margaret." Her weathered hands twisted the leather strap of her purse nervously and repeatedly, and for a brief, vulnerable moment, I saw clearly the caring woman who had patiently taught me to plant colorful tulips in our backyard garden when I was just a small child. Not the same woman who had sat in complete silence while my sister, verbally, tore me down at the anniversary dinner. "I'm genuinely sorry you're struggling with these difficulties," I said carefully, deliberately choosing my words with precision and thought. "But Rebecca specifically said you didn't need me in your lives. She's the one who needs to fix this complicated situation." Mom's eyes widened dramatically with surprise and dismay. "She's your sister," she pleaded desperately. "She's really trying her best now, but it's incredibly hard for all of us. Can't you help us financially, just until we're back on our feet and stable again?" I leaned forward in my chair, maintaining steady eye contact, my voice remaining calm and controlled. "Mom, I faithfully paid for that house for several years. All the bills, repairs, maintenance, everything you needed. Rebecca called me unappreciated and unwanted, and you simply let her say those devastating things. I'm completely done carrying the burden of her mistakes and poor decisions." Mom's face visibly crumpled with emotion, but she didn't attempt to argue or contradict my assessment of the situation. "Your dad doesn't know what to do about any of this," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "He's staying completely out of the conflict, but he's deeply worried about our future." I wasn't surprised by this revelation at all. Dad had always been a passive bystander, contentedly tinkering in his cluttered garage while the family relationships frayed and deteriorated around him. "Then he can have a serious conversation with Rebecca," I said firmly. "She's the one who started this entire destructive mess." Mom stood up slowly, her shoulders sagging with defeat and exhaustion. "I thought family meant more to you than this," she said quietly, and left the house without another word or backward glance. Laura, who had remained thoughtfully quiet throughout the entire difficult conversation, squeezed my arm gently in support. "You did the right thing," she said with conviction. I nodded in agreement, but the emotional weight of Mom's final words stayed with me long after she left. The neighborhood gossip grew increasingly louder and more invasive as time passed. Diane told a friend who told another neighbor that the Collins house was rapidly falling apart and becoming an eyesore. Robert Parker mentioned Dad's unpaid repair invoices and outstanding debts at a local block party, making their financial troubles public knowledge. Rebecca's supermarket job became a running joke among the neighbors, a dramatic fall from grace that was a far cry from her previous freelance designer image and aspirations. I deliberately stayed away from the neighborhood entirely, focusing intently on my job at the nursery and carefully saving what little money I had left after years of supporting my family. But I knew with certainty that the pressure was steadily building and intensifying. My family was rapidly running out of time and viable options, and I absolutely wasn't going to bail them out of their self-created crisis. Not now, not ever again. 3 months after I definitively walked away from my family, the house that had held all my precious childhood memories was completely gone. My sister, dad, and mom sold it hastily, unable to keep up with the mounting mortgage payments and accumulating bills that continued to pile up relentlessly. Diane, the neighborhood gossip who never missed an opportunity to share dramatic news, sent me a photograph of the for sale sign planted prominently in their front yard, the paint chipped and fading, the lawn still unkempt and overgrown from months of neglect. I didn't respond to her message, but I heard through Laura's reliable information network that they had been forced to move into a small, cramped rental apartment on the edge of Austin, a one-bedroom place that was a far cry from the spacious neighborhood they'd called home for decades. The Parkers, Robert and Ellen, told anyone who would listen about how the Collins family had fallen on such hard times, their whispered conversations carrying through block parties and casual coffee runs throughout the community. My sister now faced judgmental stares and pitying looks every time she stepped outside, her head held low, her designer dreams buried completely under the crushing weight of harsh reality and financial struggle. I didn't go to see them in their new circumstances. I had made my choice deliberately and thoughtfully, and I was committed to building an entirely new life for myself. With what remained of my carefully preserved savings, I purchased a modest, one-bedroom condo in South Austin, a quiet, peaceful spot near a beautiful park where I could walk regularly and think clearly about my future. The walls were completely bare at first, feeling empty and impersonal, but I gradually started filling them with detailed sketches of flowers, roses, lilies, peonies, beautiful reminders of the successful shop I had once owned and operated with such pride and passion. I accepted a position as a freelance consultant for a local florist, helping them design elegant wedding arrangements and teaching informative workshops on advanced bouquet styling techniques to eager students who appreciated my expertise and experience. It wasn't the same as owning petals and stems, but this new consulting work felt like a meaningful step toward reclaiming my true self and rebuilding my professional identity. Every single paycheck went directly into my own personal bank account, not toward someone else's endless bills and financial obligations. For the first time in many years, I slept peacefully at night without the crushing weight of their expectations and demands pressing down relentlessly on my shoulders and conscience. One quiet morning, as I sat peacefully sipping fresh coffee at my new kitchen counter while watching the sunrise through my condo windows, an unexpected letter arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting was completely unmistakable, Rebecca's neat and deliberate script, exactly like when she would write me sweet notes as a young kid, telling me about her day or asking for help with homework. I set the letter down carefully on the counter, leaving it unopened, and stared at it for a long time while my coffee grew cold. Part of me genuinely wanted to read it immediately, to see if she had finally understood the magnitude of what had happened and the impact of her words. But another part of me, the part that vividly remembered her cold, cruel words and her baseless accusations that night, knew deep down that it probably wouldn't change anything fundamental about our relationship. When I finally gathered the courage to open the envelope, her words were noticeably softer and more vulnerable than I had expected them to be. "Margaret," it began in her familiar handwriting, "I'm truly sorry for what I said to you. I was stressed and angry about my own situation, but that's absolutely no excuse for treating you so terribly. I didn't realize how much you actually did for our entire family. I hope we can talk and work things out." There was no mention of Dad or Mom in the letter. No genuine promise to make things right or address the underlying issues. Just a simple plea for reconciliation that felt too late and too small to bridge the enormous gap that had formed between us. I carefully folded the letter and tucked it away into a kitchen drawer, next to old family photos I hadn't looked at in many months. I didn't write back or acknowledge her attempt at communication. Rebecca had explicitly wanted a life without my presence and involvement, and I was giving her exactly what she had requested, not out of spite or revenge, but because I had finally realized that I deserved a life where I wasn't invisible, unappreciated, or taken for granted. Dad's continued silence throughout this entire ordeal spoke volumes. Mom's desperate pleas for help felt hollow after her failure to defend me. Rebecca's initial cruelty had revealed her true character. They had all shown me exactly who they were as people when the pressure was on, and I wasn't going back to that toxic dynamic. I systematically blocked all their phone numbers, deleted their accumulated voicemails without listening, and deliberately let the emotional and physical distance between us grow naturally. Thomas and Laura continued to check in on me regularly, often bringing delicious takeout food or inviting me to their delightful garden parties where I could socialize with genuine, caring people. But I was gradually learning to stand completely alone and be comfortable with my own company, and it felt absolutely right for the first time in years. Looking back now with clarity and perspective, I can see the profound lesson carved deeply into every step of this painful mess. Family isn't automatically defined by blood relations or genetic connections. True family is built on mutual respect, genuine support, and the willingness to see and acknowledge each other's sacrifices and contributions. I had given absolutely everything I had to keep their comfortable world turning smoothly, but they had taken my efforts completely for granted without any real appreciation. And that fundamental lack of respect and gratitude had broken our family bonds irreparably. Rebecca, Dad, and Mom have learned the hard way that words carry real weight and consequences, and so do the choices we make in difficult moments. They're rebuilding their lives now in their own way, learning to be self-sufficient, and I genuinely wish them no harm or suffering. But I'm completely done carrying their emotional and financial load. Self-reliance, I've discovered through this painful experience, is the essential foundation of any relationship worth keeping and maintaining. Without that mutual independence and respect, love becomes just an empty word, hollow and brittle, without any real substance or meaning. To everyone who has followed this personal story all the way to the end, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your time, your attention, and your support mean more than I can possibly express in words. I've shared this intimate story because I know that some of you have felt unseen and unappreciated by the very people you would give everything for without hesitation. You've carried their heavy emotional and financial weight only to be pushed aside or dismissed when it was convenient for them. I see you clearly, and I'm deeply grateful for every moment you've spent reading and connecting with my experience. If this story resonates with your own life situation, please hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join this growing community of people who understand what it means to find strength in difficult circumstances. Share your own story in the comments section below. How did you find your inner strength when everything seemed hopeless? How did you learn to value yourself when others didn't? Let's keep this important conversation going because we're all stronger when we support each other and share our experiences honestly.